Now we're going to shift gears a little bit. We just finished talking about simulations. Now we're going to talk about sampling. And sampling is something that we do when we're trying to, say, do a survey or an experiment of some sort, which of course we're going to talk about both of those in greater detail in the coming chapter. So this is chapter 10 of your text. So the three big ideas of sampling. The three big ideas are that we're examining a part of the whole, we're randomizing, and we're going to talk about sample size. So idea number one has to do with examining part of the whole. So the basic big idea behind this is that we are trying very hard to learn about an entire group of individuals called the population. So the population is a group of individuals that we are trying to learn about. However, it's costly, either time-wise or monetarily, to collect data on everybody in your population. And remember, when I talk about population, I'm not just talking about the population of the world or the population of the US. It's the population of interest. So whatever we're trying to, find data about. So instead of talking to every single person in the population, we're going to collect data on a smaller group of individuals from the population called a sample. And that's representative of and pulled from the selected population. So for instance, if I were interested in high school students' texting habits, the population would be all high school students. The sample would be those particular high school students that I actually surveyed or observed, etc. So methods for collecting data are surveys, sometimes called sample surveys, observational studies, and experiments. So we're going to talk about all of these in greater detail. That's chapter 11, chapter 10, both of those, throughout this week. But these are the three that we're focusing on: is surveys, studies, and experiments. So for instance, if I want to find out if students at a local high school like the food served in the cafeteria, here are some sample ways that I could talk to those students to find out their opinions. One of them, ask for a certain number of volunteers to give their opinion. 2, give an English class at the school to survey. Set up an online poll, or have students take a quick survey in the cafeteria by a show of hands. Now, there's something wrong with each of these. So what could be wrong? Well, looking at the first one, if I'm asking for volunteers, in general, people who volunteer their opinions have strong opinions one way or the other, which means they really love that food in the cafeteria. Probably not. Or they really hate it and they want to tell everybody about it. Giving an English class at the school the survey. This one could be biased somehow, because typically in high schools, people take English based on whatever their grade level is. So 9th grade English, 10th grade English, etc. I know that when I taught high school, the seniors at my school did not eat in the cafeteria. They all left because we had an open campus for seniors, whereas all of the freshmen did eat in the cafeteria. So the answers that I would get from a group of freshman English kids to a group of senior English kids would be quite different. Setting up an online poll that students could take. This isn't so bad, except that it is voluntary, and not all of the students at the school might have internet access. Hopefully they do, but you never know. And then have students take a quick survey in the cafeteria. Again, this one's not good because students are easily influenced by their peers, and also people who are in the cafeteria would be people who are obviously eating there and probably don't mind the food so much. So the problem is all of these situations have a form of bias. So bias occurs when we have a sampling method that overemphasizes or underemphasizes some characteristic of the population, which means that the results that we're going to get are going to be skewed in some way because we did not do a good job of choosing a proper sampling technique. So one way, of course, is through randomization, which is big idea number 2, is to randomize. So, of course, we already talked about that it would be time-consuming and futile to list all of the characteristics of a population: age, race, ethnicity, income, marital status, etc., and then try to represent them equally. So instead of doing that, if we can choose a random sample, that is going to give us, hopefully, a representative sample of the population. Here's an example. I have a table here that's showing two different samples, each of 8,000 randomly selected customers of a company. The question is, do we feel the samples are representative of all of our customers? Well, here's what I'm looking at. I look at the fact that the mean age, the percent of white, female, children, etc., that all of these values are pretty similar to one another, which means I feel fairly confident that the samples that I chose are probably representative of all customers because I got the same values. If I had one sample where the mean age was 22 and one where the mean age was 60.9, well, then I would feel like I probably screwed up on one of the samples or possibly both. So again, when we're randomizing, we should get similar results for each of the trials that we do. So that's one way to check to make sure that we have, in fact, done a good job of randomizing. And of course, idea number 3 is the sample size. So we need 100 students at Bellevue University to get a random sample of the university. How many Americans would I need to achieve the same level of randomness? Well, still 100. So the sample size, the idea behind sample size is that you need the sample size to be large enough to be representative of the whole, but it doesn't need to be proportional to the whole population. So again, it's the number of individuals, and we'll talk more about what those specific numbers might be, but we're looking at number rather than the percentage of the whole. The number that we choose to represent is called the sample size, and typically we use a lowercase n to represent our sample size. So in this case, n would be the 100 students. So in sample size, the goal, of course, is to find a balance between the number of people being surveyed and the cost of the survey. So obviously, the more the merrier if we're actually going to survey, but that takes time to track down all of those people. That takes money to pay people to survey them, etc. If you don't have enough in the sample, then you're not going to get a good representation of your population, and then your survey will not really have any usefulness. But if you have too many, it can cost too much money or too much time to collect all of the results. A census occurs when we survey every single person in a population. Now, we've already talked about how this isn't amazing, not because the results would be bad. So obviously, this would be the best. If I could talk to every single person, there's no guesswork involved. I'm talking to everybody in the population. I know exactly what they think, exactly what they want, exactly how much they make, etc. But typically, our population is so large that it would be very prohibitive to try to do this. So it's pricey both in monetary cost and the time it takes to survey every single person or to track down every person. It's difficult or impossible to find everyone in the population. The population is always changing with births and deaths. Often college students are counted doubly because they count at home and then they also are counted at school. And those without an address, so the homeless, those without proper documentation, so immigrants, etc. A lot of times those people are not included, again, because they don't have those official address, etc., for us to be able to track them down. So census would be great, ideally, in theory, but in actuality, sample size is probably going to be just a part of the whole.